Thank you for your comments about transit. Senator Cramer is coming back, so I'm going to go a bit of a second round until he does. Undersecretary Coase, I appreciate what you've said about transit-oriented development. One of the wonderful things about getting to chair this committee, when I took it over, it's always been called Banking, Housing, and Urban Development. It was really the committee that took care of Wall Street until I became chair, and we have emphasized sometimes, and Senator Smith does that, sometimes calls it housing and banking, but one of the focuses of this committee is public transit, and there isn't nearly enough interest in this town in public transit. It gets a whole lot of people, particularly moderate income people, to work. I remember a story. I was in Cincinnati one day, and their public transit system is called SORTA, and I talked to the leader of the transit system who was struggling with keeping some additional routes that are there during the week, but routes that they don't have enough ridership for the weekend. And there was a young woman who worked at a moderate $10 or $12, $13 an hour job. And the transit system, she had to work on Saturday. The transit system didn't run on Saturday, so she had to Uber to work on Saturday. She talked to her boss, and her boss said, "You got to come in on the weekend. That's the way it is if you want to keep this job." And she had to Uber to work on Saturday, which ate up most of her income. So one of the things we're able to do is expand the service of SORTA service. So Senator Cramer just done it. I'll turn to him in a second. But I like what you said about the opportunity for new housing construction near transit developments. That's really important in all the big cities and the moderate-sized cities in my state. It can support, and what DOT can do to support such transit-oriented development, and transit-oriented development can bring you opportunities to those communities, again, especially those communities that in the 60s, 70s, and 80s were essentially almost demolished for interstate highways. And I look to any of the major cities in my state, particularly Columbus, where the number of people living in a neighborhood on the east side of Columbus, mostly African-American, shrunk by about 2/3 because the highway went through disrupting, demolishing businesses, demolishing people's homes. They had to move elsewhere. The community's vitality was essentially sapped and wasn't able to rebuild. So always thinking about those issues. So thank you for that. Senator Cramer from North Dakota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. Mr. Coase, I'm gonna initiate a conversation with you that will play off a little bit, I think, on your conversation with Senator Van Hollen relating to formula fixes. So I'm looking for some potential fixes. To a challenge I just learned about recently, I was at a groundbreaking ceremony for an expansion of the Hector International Airport in Fargo. And Fargo, of course, is our most populous city in North Dakota. And the mayor, Tim Mahoney, came up to me, and it's one of the great things about a small place. The mayor talks right to you. He's better than any lobbyist, just so you know. And I love my lobbyist friends. But he brought this to my attention that Fargo had gone, they had one more baby or something and went from 199,999 people to 200,000. So you already know where I'm going. And he noticed this, reduction in the formula funding, or at least in the amount that Fargo got. Now, it gets a little more nuanced than that, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, because they went from an MPO to a TMA in the transit funding. But by the way, just so you know, and I think this gets back to your previous discussion with Senator Van Hollen. The formula changes, of course, but not just the formula, the flexibility for the community to use the money the way they were using it, which in this case of Fargo was for operational expenses, and not understanding all of the fungibility of cash and all the ways you maybe could do this. He was just asking for help. And so as we dug into it a little more, we learned that there are, in fact, rules, laws that govern how you can distribute these funds, the transit funds, based on the size of a community. My concern is that there's a little bit of a perverse incentive in that formula that actually discourages growth. And we don't want that, I don't think, on the one hand. On the other hand, maybe there's a rational reason for it. My ask of you is just I describe this situation, tell you this story, and then maybe just see if you have some thoughts about it, ideas on how we could either legislatively or through budget process or whatever discretion the agency would have to sort of not punish communities like Fargo and see if there's a better way to do this.
Senator Cramer, thank you for bringing that issue here, not only to my attention, but I know this is one that's shared within our building.
Sure.
Communities need to be able to meet their needs. And we believe that whether it's through the formula program or even from our discretionary grants, we should be able to give them as much flexibility to achieve those goals. We do believe, and as I was discussing with Senator Van Hollen, that transit agencies, particularly coming out of COVID, are recognizing that travel patterns are different.
Sure.
We're seeing that now developers want to build near transit and create more walkable communities. We need to give transit agencies their ability to leverage not only the pent-up demand that they're seeing in the private market, but also the unique needs of their residents as we do these travel demands. So we would love to work with you, as we say with Senator Van Hollen, to look at how we can make sure the formula programs, particularly on the transit side, particularly these larger systems, have the flexibility they need to meet the changing environment, which again comes back to people want to live in great quality neighborhoods.
Sure. Well, and I love that you refer to them as larger communities because we kind of consider Fargo to be larger than the small ones,
right? Exactly.
But smaller than the large ones.
That's what they say about Thomasville, my hometown.
Right.
We're still a small town.
Yes, that's the flexibility, which is I really appreciate. And quite honestly, and I know we've been talking. Obviously, we're talking about the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which I not only supported, voted for, but championed. And the formula issues of all of the distribution of funds is really important to small states, right? That we can't sort of reserve 100 miles for gravel in the middle of an interstate highway system. But similarly, for our communities where you have populations that certainly depend on good transit systems, we just want it to be, to your point, be successful. We want the communities to be successful. So to the degree there's legislative fixes that are necessary, maybe Chris and I could work together with you on some of that, right? And then where there's flexibility within the agency, we sure encourage that as well.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. Thank you.
Senator Cramer, thank